Hello and welcome to our Veronica Mars review. I'm Paul,
And I'm Dave.
and this week we're discussing the episode Betty and Veronica. This episode originally aired March 29th, 2005, so it's been about a month since the last episode.
Mm.
So, in terms of video games, I'm going to quickly just pick like the major releases over the last month because I don't want to read everything.
Yeah, since it's kind of a month's worth and there's quite a bit, which on one hand is understandable, but also the marvelous case of, oh dear God.
Okay, so just some major hits here. If you had a PS2, February 24th, you could pick up Tekken 5.
Yes, within the Tekken series.
Yes. PS2, Xbox, or GameCube owners could pick up Fight Night Round 2 on February 28th. Did you ever play any of the Fight Night games?
Not too much, but very much remember the advertising and whatnot for it.
Okay. Xbox and PC gamers could pick up Star Wars Republic Commando. If you're on the Xbox, it came out February 28th and March 1st on PC for God only knows what reason.
Most likely some reason, but still possibly a little ridiculous.
If you had a PS2, on March 1st, you could pick up Devil May Cry 3 Dante's Awakening.
Yes, the fancy one.
Yes. If you had a Nintendo DS on March 13th, you could pick up Pokemon Dash.
Because it was a thought. It was a thought.
Yep. If you had a GameCube on March 14th, you could pick up Donkey Kong Jungle Beat.
Yes, because the best way to use a bongo controller is to beat the snot out of your enemies.
It absolutely is. Um. Hmm, hmm, hmm. If you had a GameCube, PS2, or Xbox on March 21st, you could pick up Time Splitters Future Perfect.
Ah, yes, that particular series.
If you had a PS2 on March 22nd, you could pick up God of War.
Yes, with the start of that series.
Yes. 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 If you had a PSP on March 22nd, you could pick up Metal Gear Acid. I don't know.
Understandable, but also the mild case of not too familiar with that section of the story.
Yeah, it's this weird like collectible card turn-based RPG version of Metal Gear.
On the one hand, I'm surprised they go that route, but also the case of I'm not too surprised that they would go that route.
I guess it makes sense for a handheld.
Yeah.
If you had a Game Boy Advance on March 28th, you could pick up Mario Party Advance if you wanted to play
You
it.
know, if you couldn't manage to get any other Mario parties, you could go with supposedly the worst one.
Oh, would it be the worst one?
Only from hearing the little bits of people online discussing about it is supposedly the case, but also the
Oh,
case of out of all the Mario parties, it's the only one I have not played.
it got bad reviews. Okay, so yeah, it's the worst one. So March 29th, the day this episode aired, there's three releases. So on the PS2, you could pick up Dynasty Warriors 5.
Understandable, but also the case of so many Dynasty Warriors, not sure what made this one fancy.
If you had an Xbox on March 29th, you had two new options. You could pick up Red Ninja End of Honor, which, okay, I've never heard of this
Yeah,
game.
yeah, and especially with the typical Xbox crowd, I'm not sure if they would bother be interested in that one.
It also came out on PS2, apparently,
Okay.
but I don't know. And also on the Xbox, on the same day, you could pick up Spike Out Battle Street. What?
Which seems a little bit more on the Xbox's radar.
What's Spike Out? I don't remember. Oh, they're like slash 'em up. Oh, okay, interesting. Huh. Oh, it's like kind of like a Streets of Rage type thing. Okay.
Mm.
I'm not overly familiar with that. But anyway, moving on to the number one song in America, Dave. Any guesses what it could possibly be?
Again, going up from next week into what would supposedly go on there.
It's been about a month,
Again, with
so
a limited time.
I'll give you a hint. It is not Let Me Love You by Mario.
Mm-hmm. But again, with the particular trends of the time,
This is
kind
very
of a marvelous case.
this is very on brand for
What?
2005.
No, that's understandable, but also kind of the case of around our age with what we were specifically listening to was not so much the case of what was on the number one charts at the time. Nah, nothing's immediately coming to mind.
No? Okay. It is a song called Candy Shop by 50 Cent featuring Olivia.
No, that definitely tracks.
It
Though,
absolutely
it's a mild
does.
case of the only reason why I understand that song is because Weird Al used it once.
Okay. I was going to say, like, 50 Cent is 2005's, like, embodied. I feel like
Yeah.
2003 to, like, 2006 is 50 Cent's, like, peak.
Mm.
Yeah. So, and for the number one film in America that weekend, any ideas what it could be?
And was around that time. Nothing's immediately jumping out with it, but again, more actual start of the year. I can't specifically remember what would have been the really big thing at around the time.
I will be very surprised if you guess this because it is not like a super well-known film. It's a remake, kind of, I guess. Technically, I think it's a remake, but it's not really also.
You know, just to make it confusing.
Okay, so it's a movie called Guess Who, which is a loose remake of a movie from the 60s called Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with that film.
Interesting. I think it's mostly a question of is it kind of more comedy related or what sort of genre is it pulling from?
Okay, so the 60s version, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, is it's about a black guy who's dating this white girl and he goes to meet her parents. Right? Which in the 60s
Understandable for the time.
was relatively controversial.
Yeah, for the time.
So it was
Yeah.
more of like it's considered like a romantic comedy drama film, but it plays, I would argue, more into the drama than the comedy.
Mm-hmm.
The 2005 one, Guess Who, is about a white guy who's dating a black girl and goes to meet her parents, but it plays more as a comedy than as a drama.
Okay. So kind of a marvelous case of a film being played at two different time periods, essentially being the same film, but just the mindsets of the time turning it into a drama or a comedy.
Yeah, kind of. I also don't think that the 2005 one reviewed terribly well.
I wouldn't be surprised. Again, it's completely understandable for what it is and possibly for the start of the year, but also kind of the case of there's probably only so far that you can kind of go with it.
Yeah, I also feel like it's... Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, let us move on to the episode. So, alrighty. Veronica searches through her stuff and finds a microphone and a pencil sharpener, suggesting that Clarence Weedman was tracking her. Veronica waits for Wallace after a basketball game until Principal Clemens pulls her aside. Principal Clemens asks Veronica to find the school's mascot, a bird named Polly, which has recently been stolen. Veronica agrees to help under certain conditions. The principal and others think that the rival school, Pan High, took the bird. Wallace is becoming increasingly popular and abandons Veronica at lunch. Veronica goes undercover at Penn High, but their basketball players act as surprised as Neptune's at the parrot's theft. In addition, Veronica receives news that the Pan High mascot has also been stolen. Flashback to where the previous episode left off, Veronica confronts her mother about her feelings for Jake Kane. Leanne says that she knows Jake Kane is innocent because they were together at the time of the murder. Veronica asks Leo for tapes of Lily's murder investigation. Back in the past, Leanne informs Veronica that the meeting was to protect her. Undercover at the school, everyone seems to be congratulating a nerdy-looking boy, Wilson, on stealing the parrot, while Neptune sends a package of goat meat to the cafeteria. Veronica talks to Wilson and flirts with him, asking if he would give her a tour of Rest Stop 15, a place where students go to park, buy, and sell, etc. Veronica catches the boy's locker combination and calls Weevil with the parrot information. He lets Weevil know of the plan to meet at Rest Stop 15. Upon arriving at the rest stop, Wilson is confronted by Weevil. Wilson says that the parrot in the picture is not Neptune's mascot. Back in the past, Leanne says that she does not know who Veronica's real father is, and that a paternity test would be needed. Leo brings back the Lily Kane murder investigations to Veronica. At Neptune High, Veronica sits with Wallace and his new friends. Later, Wallace leads Veronica to a truck with a goat in it. Actually, it's more of a van, I guess, but whatever. Veronica listens to the interrogation tapes, and she hears Keith talking to Jake Kane. Veronica sends Wallace to deliver a gift to Clarence Weidman's assistant. Veronica listens to Keith's investigation of Celeste Kane. That night, Veronica goes on a date with Leo before she sees Meg with Duncan on a double date with Jake and Celeste at the same restaurant. Flashing back one more time, Leanne reveals Celeste's knowledge of the affair. Veronica points out a mistake in Jake and Celeste's story. Leanne says that they're at the hotel for 20 minutes, while Jake said that they were there for 2.5 hours. Meanwhile, a Pan High student wearing a mask shows the Neptune people over TV that he has the parrot. The student demands that Wallace not play, or else Polly will die. Veronica talks with Meg, who says that the thug must have put in the announcement the night before. The two examine the photograph, and Veronica sees a basketball number on the person's sneakers. Veronica steals both the mascots back and frames the actual culprit, a Neptune boy who stole the parrot so he could kick Wallace out and go back to being a starter, so that he could continue sabotaging his team's chances of winning the basketball game and ensure winning bets against Neptune. Veronica checks her mother into a rehabilitation center. Veronica talks to her father about the discovery that Abel Kuntz is someone else's proxy. Veronica takes out the pencil sharpener and states fakely that she knows who collected Abel Kuntz's accounts. Veronica, assuming that Wallace has delivered the gift, which he did and it had a microphone in it, listens. Clarence Weidman asks his assistant to call Amelia... Oh god, it's a French name, I can't remember how to pronounce this. De Longpré. And Veronica finds out that Amelia is Abel Kuntz's daughter. Dun dun dun. Alrighty. So, what did we think of this episode, Dave?
Well, on the one hand, it was interesting with all the particular stories that were kind of going through, but I'm not sure if it was just with how my week decided to go. I had a bit of a tricky time actually kind of keeping track of most everything, so it was a case that I had to run the episode twice to kind of follow the basis of here's what the main story is, here's one of the flashbacks, here's what the other particular sort of is, here's another flashback, and it's like, oh my god, my brain's not awake enough for this. But I think sort of separating everything, it was interesting enough with going into the high school rivalry sort of stuff, and especially not sure if it's just the case with my experience with being familiar with these types of stories, but even with sort of having the hint of, oh, hey, it's probably someone on the other team getting on the starter. The additional thing of him being part of the betting ring for everything on there was a nice additional touch to it. The additional information of Veronica finding out that there was more cracks within the armor of Making sure that I have the name right for. No, that was that. The
Oh, for Jake and
security
Celeste.
person.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the security gentleman sort of spying on her and keeping track on things. But also the case of her being her knowledgeable self and turning the tables on a bit to somewhat get a step ahead on it. But also nice to sort of see her interactions with her mom of the case of all the stuff that's been happening, what's sort of been uh, hap- happening on that side of the story, as well as her sending her to rehabilitation to help her out, which is the case of her somewhat hooray her mom is supposedly going to be okay, but again from last week the things are supposedly not going to turn out too well.
Okay, some important things to keep in mind from this episode. We find out that Leanne doesn't know who Veronica's father is. It could be Jake or Keith. We still don't have a clear answer on that.
Mm-hmm.
We find out that Leanne says that she was with Jake at the time of Lily's murder, but that Celeste barged in. However, Celeste was only there for 20 minutes, so she's still kind of not eliminated as a potential suspect.
Yeah, that still puts a hell of a lot of time on her case of not accounted for.
Yes. Veronica also gets the interrogation tapes of Jake and Celeste, and probably a bunch of other people, where they claim that they were at the hotel for 2.5 hours, which obviously isn't true because we know Celeste left after only about 20 minutes.
Mm.
And we also find out that Abel Kuntz has a daughter, which would give him motivation to take the fall if somebody guaranteed, let's say, some money for his daughter.
Mm.
So, some things to keep in mind. I
Very
thought
much so.
I thought this was a fun episode. I think it's fun that they do kind of like a very typical kind of high school story about like, oh no, somebody stole our mascot, and it's like it's kind of juxtaposed against this much bigger thing of like who killed Lily, and we're getting a lot of clues about that. So I think that's kind of a fun little thing there. And I was happy to see Weevil back. We haven't seen Weevil in a little while.
That's definitely true. It was also nice within this episode that Wallace has a little bit more place within the school, being part of the team, basketball team and whatnot from there. But also the case of he's still on Veronica's side, helping out with things. Though whether or not this will supposedly cause some additional friction in the future might be put into question and bring up some supposed concerns. But also the case of, haha, this is a typical sort of TV show in the early 20s, early 2000s. So the case of it's understandable, but also the case of it's not going to break out of too many of the traditions from old 80s sitcoms and other sorts of things like that, I don't think.
I think you'll be surprised. Anyway,
Hmm.
did you notice that there are a lot of references to Archie comics in this episode? Like a
Like
lot.
maybe one or two, nothing that would immediately jump to mind because again, it's one of the weird things that it's always kind of been within my peripheral of things that have kind of gone on. But aside from an animated series that came in the late 90s to early 2000s, don't know that much about Archie.
Okay, so Veronica obviously uses the alias of Betty at the other school, which Betty and Veronica, major characters in Archie.
Hmm.
She also says that she's a transfer student from Riverdale, which is the place that the Archie comics take place in.
Yeah.
And the mascot, Polly, is also the sister of Betty in Archie comics.
Interesting.
Yes, there are a lot of references to Archie comics in this episode.
On the one hand, I'm not too surprised, but also kind of the mild case of whether or not someone just kind of had that in the back pocket and or had a very tiring writing day and it's just like, where do I keep that random Archie comic and maybe supposedly pull off from that a little bit.
I think the minute they decided they were going to have Veronica go undercover and call herself Betty, they were just like, let's just go crazy with it. Let's just throw in as many references as we can get away with. Alrighty. So, if there's nothing else about this episode, Next week, we'll be discussing the episode Cains and Abels.
Hmm.
In this episode, after finding out about Abel Kuntz's daughter, Amelia, Veronica tracks her down and tells her that the Cains are paying off her father. Meanwhile, Veronica investigates the mysterious harasser of Sabrina Fuller. Yes, there's going to be some things are going to happen in the next couple episodes, Dave.
Interesting.
All right. So until then, I'm Paul.
And I'm Dave.